Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. And today I'm going to be doing a tasting of McConnell's Irish Whiskey. And this is a 5-year-old, yes, age-stated whiskey from McConnell's. And if you have watched the channel for some time, or you listen to the podcast, you know that I had a chance to interview the brand ambassador, Sarah Kennedy, about this whiskey. And we went all into the history and talked about this bottle. This is a magnificent bottle. It really is. And it's based off of old bottles that they had found from the original distillery. So really nice design here, lots of elements to it. We talk about all the elements during the podcast interview, and so this is a very well thought out bottle in all cases except for one, and I'm going to give you a warning on this. That is the easiest cork I have ever removed from a bottle. And the reason I bring this up is because I plan to take this with me to the families on Easter, and I thought, I'm going to have to wrap that up with some cellophane to make sure that that stays on airtight, because that could fall over and very easily I could have McConnell's as a nice smell throughout the trunk of my car. Yes, officer, there's whiskey in my trunk. I can't deny it. You can smell it. Yeah, that wouldn't be so good. So anyway, if you want to learn more about that, McConnell's, then you can check out my episode with Sarah, but I am going to give you a couple of details. This is the oldest brand in Northern Ireland. Now, when I say that, you go, wait a second, Bushmills says that they're 1608. So when was this? Well, this was in 1776. And you don't have to be brilliant at math to understand that this came out long after Bushmills' 1608 date. But this is where marketing can get you into trouble, because I've had this discussion with a lot of people, and when I tell them McConnell's is the oldest, they go, the oldest brand, they go, no, Bushmills is the oldest brand. And I have to explain to them, we have to do some splitting of hairs here, because McConnell's as a brand started in 1776. Bushmills as a brand started in 1784. So the brand Bushmills is actually not as old as the brand McConnell's. And Jameson, I think, was 1780. So again, we're talking about, you know, here it is, at least 4 years earlier than Jameson. The 1608 date for Bushmills comes from their license, which was a farmer's license that was given to them by King James I. And that came about in 1608. So when we want to talk about the oldest distillery grounds, then the old Bushmills distillery is on the oldest distillery grounds from 1608. So take that for what it is. McConnell's disappeared for a long time. There were actually some fires that happened in their warehouses, and one of the worst in the early 1900s took out 500,000 gallons of whiskey. So devastating. The distillery hung on, but it just wasn't the same, especially since Ireland went through a whole whiskey depression thanks to Prohibition in America, which was a big market for it, but also thanks to the issues with trying to trade with Britain, because after 1919, Britain and Northern Ireland did not have the greatest of relations, or Ireland and that area. And so because of that, you know, the UK's colonies were also large purchasers of Irish whiskey, and that whole market dried up as well. So McConnell's held on, and then just finally faded away, went into receivership, and now they have come back. And they are working on a distillery, and they are right now sourcing their whiskey. But in this modern age, there's a lot of people who are sourcing whiskey, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. The thing is, where do they get the whiskey from, and is it a quality whiskey that they are making? Now, when I looked at this bottle, I'm like, and I see it's $30 on the shelf, I'm thinking, wow, I mean, it's a nice enough bottle that there's some value in buying such a nice looking bottle. And you're thinking, okay, for this heavy, substantial bottle and all that they've put into it, how good could the whiskey be in it at such a price point? Well, we're about to find out. So this is aged in ex-bourbon casks, and the ABV is a little low. It's 42% alcohol by volume, so an 84 proof whiskey. Comes with very light nose. It has some floral scents there, a little bit of maybe a lemony citrus that comes in. Slight bit of vanilla, maybe a little what I call kind of a warehouse wood smell that comes in there. Maybe a little bit of apple in there, but just very light. The nose on this is somewhat light. And so let's jump to the palate. Cheers. The malty grains on this are really nice. Vanilla, a little bit of honey in there, and then it comes into a peppery note that sits there, not overly heavy, and then kind of coats the palate. It just subtly takes over. You have it's a fairly clean, slightly fruity, slightly malty experience. And so what's interesting is, again, this is a 5-year-old whiskey, so it's had some time to mature in the casks, and it is a blend of malt and grain whiskey, meaning that it's used barley, and then grain whiskey can be corn, could be wheat, so hard to know exactly what that is. But it's nice, and the malt actually stands out. It's more out front than you might expect in a blend. So maybe they're using a pretty decent amount of malt in that blend. The pepperiness now picks up a little bit more on the nose. I always like taking a drink and then coming back and seeing if the nose changes, because there is that work between your mouth and your nose. In fact, when you're breathing in through your nose, always make sure to also breathe in through your mouth slightly at the same time, because those vapors go into your nose, but they also can affect your palate as well at the same time. And so it's good to have those working together. It's definitely the grain that stands out for me. It's got a medium mouthfeel to it. Maybe a little lemon comes in, that pepper again. But when I say pepper, it's very subtle. This is a really easy drinking whiskey, and this seems to be a theme I'm picking up in Irish whiskeys, that they are very, they have some things going on, but they also can be very just drinkable. And so if you're hanging out with friends and you got a bottle of this, you're going to impress them with how nice the bottle looks, and then they're going to taste the whiskey and they're going to go, wow, that's actually really interesting. And I think more interesting than the Jamesons of the world, which to me, Jameson is almost more of a, it needs something else. Something else has to go with it. In fact, I use Jameson to sometimes put a drop of peated whiskey into, and then it becomes a peated whiskey. This is something that I would want to drink without doctoring it. It's just a really nice conversational whiskey. And so it's good. It's good. And at, like I say, $30 a bottle, it'll be interesting to see what happens as they start producing their own whiskeys and how their whiskey will evolve and develop as it goes along. So interesting history. And like I say, I encourage you to go check out the podcast episode or find the video of the discussion with Sarah here on YouTube. And because she's got lots of great information to share, talks about Belfast as well. And I am headed to Belfast. I will be there for 2 days at least. And so hopefully get a chance to see where some of these old warehouses were and pick up a little bit more on Belfast's whiskey history, stuff for me to share with you in the future. Until next time, cheers and Slainte. Oh, vanilla custard comes in there too. Nice. Very nice.